Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7:04 p.m. Central. We got Wham here with us tonight, representing.
It's representing.
Wham-tacular. And I'm down here in Florida. She's up in Hudson Valley. And we got Wallace Wagner here with us tonight. Where are you at, Wallace? What state?
I'm in Virginia, in between Roanoke and Lynchburg.
I know exactly where that is. Yep.
What do you think about that old Mothman in there? You think there's something to it, or are they just going a little butt wild with the tourism? Well, I think there's something to it, but it's interesting how they react to it and everything.
Yeah. I think there is something to it, but I'm not a Mothman expert. I'll tell you that right up front, but that happened back in my home state of West Virginia during the Silver Bridge collapse.
Definitely. Well, it's great to have you here tonight. Thanks to Mark Eddy. Mark Eddy's an old friend that used to co-host with me. And I ran into him again. He's been giving us the hookup. We had Barbara DeLong and Ken Gonsword with us for last week. We got Wallace here, and we got a few more folks coming up. So I know the main reason we're here is because, well, I know Wham's had experiences, but my experiences started me doing this show. And I like to tell, especially the guests here on UFOs, so they feel more comfortable. And I'll tell my story shortly. As I'll try to make it as short as possible, even though there's, I could go on forever about it, and I usually do, till I can't shut up about it. But basically, I was in Georgia, where I was born, and I was 17, and I ended up going to an emergency room because I was having some pain down below, and I found out eventually that I had testicular cancer. I had to go through chemo, which really sucked, and then I'm fine now, and it healed and everything. And then a few years later, my dad died. Well, that was a lot. And for some reason, I think that kind of suffering opened my senses, and I started to see things in the sky that were abnormal, that were people said that I was attracting them on some level. And I saw some different types of beings. I don't know if I was ever taken, but I've had weird UFO stuff above me to where you're like, is it taken me? And I don't know it. If they have, I don't remember anything. But I've seen two beings of light leave my house and fly into the heavens as if they'd been in my house while I was listening to the Bible on a DVD, watching it on one of those meditation word watch or whatever. Something told me to go outside. I turned around and looked towards my house and saw two beings of light fly into the heavens as if they were in my house and flew through the roof into the heavens. And I don't know what they were, deceased loved ones, angels, emissaries of Jesus Christ. I say they must have a boss that glows too, because they were glowing. Maybe it's the sun.
Beings of light. Beings
of light. And they could have been angels or aliens. I've heard everything. But basically a lot of weird stuff happened, and it led to me doing the show to find out more about it. At one point, I was having trouble getting interviews, and I said a prayer and had some weird energy red kind of UFOs in the sky, and I screamed, and my brother and few. And then the next thing you know, we've been doing this 16 years. So the next thing you know, I got on a radio show talking about it for the first time or something. And then that led to next thing you know, I was on the phone with Stanton Friedman and Lloyd Pye, the Star Child skull, he's passed now. Jim Mars, a lot of these people have passed, but it was kind of connected. I was like, did aliens hook me up with an interview? I don't know, but it felt like that. But so we've been doing this for 16 years, just trying to figure it out, and we like to hear everybody's interpretation of it. And I know you get into some controversial subjects, UFOs in the Bible, and much more than that with your new book. What initially led you to this subject matter? What happened to you? Did anything happen, or just an interest, or something, a catalyst?
Well, I was a mailman, one of many jobs I've had in this lifetime, here in this county back in 2016. I had just made a delivery and I was walking back to my vehicle, And something had me stop in front of the lady's yard and look up. And right over my head was a white Tic Tac craft. And this was a year before, you know, this was made public with all the videos. So it was, I'm guessing, maybe 1,000 feet over my head. I've been back several times, and I originally thought maybe closer to 2,000 feet. Now I'm thinking 500 to 1,000 feet. I really don't know. I had no way to measure. I do know it had no nacelles, no wings, no windows. It appeared as a gleaming white solid object, literally straight over my head. And it let me see it uh, uh, for about 3 seconds, and then it wasn't there anymore. And at the time, I was teaching Sunday school, uh, had all kinds of positions in the church, both Southern Baptist and Methodist. And let's just say that was a starting point. I had read Eric von Däniken's book back in the 70s, Chariots of the Gods. So all that information was in my file cabinet in my brain.
Yeah.
But it just became real. It caused me to back up and start doing my own study and own research on several topics. I mean, early church history, Bible history, UFO history, UFOs in the Bible, secret government, as well as, disclosure and some other topics. And as the years went by, I realized that a lot of what I had been taught was incorrect. And the late, great Patrick Cook, I think, said it the best, referring to UFOs in the Bible, that the church ignores it. The government hides it. Science avoids it. And education rejects it. But these UFOs have been with us since before Christ. So, and they're here now. We've never been alone, and we're not alone now. And they are scattered throughout the Bible, and it's just not covered. Oh, I've taught Sunday school for years, and we'd come upon, topics and phrases and whatnot, and we would all go to our reference books or a Concord or all the reference books, and it's never in there. It's just left out. They pretend it's not there, and that's with virtually every expositor or every so-called expert or theologian. They pretend they're not there, and that is one of the reasons the first interview I did for Within Grasp was done with Dr. Barry Downing, who was the first preacher to publicly declare that there are UFOs in the Bible. And this goes back to the late 60s. He's written a couple of books.
Mhm.
He's a Presbyterian minister. He's retired now. He is still alive. But, he was thoroughly convinced that what happened with the Red Sea and Moses and the pillars of light and all of that was all conducted with UFOs. And, from my studies, that certainly is true, but it's much more expansive than that. It starts literally in Genesis and goes through Revelation. There are UFOs mentioned. So,
And in the Bible, like I know some of the big ones, but I'm sure you know about more of them in there than I do. Like, of course, Ezekiel's wheel. That's some of the first ones that pop up. And then other than that, right now, my mind's blank. What are some of the other big ones in it? And in the Bible, aren't they God? Is that who they're supposed to be? Or are they saying it's something else? I mean, how do you ignore that? Like Ezekiel's wheel, that's pretty big,
well, I mean, Ezekiel literally saw a craft. And
Yeah.
I have a picture of it by Joseph Bloomfield in Crossing the Crevice, my first book. He actually set out to disprove it and ended up proving it and changed his mind completely. But to answer your question or questions, I have to ask a question. And I've asked this on several shows and have yet to get an answer. You know, for us Christians, and I still call myself a Christian, it's just I have a different interpretation of what a Christian is now. But I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ still. But if God is omni everything like we're taught, how do you go down if you're already supposed to be there? And these gods in the Bible, plural, go down some 19 different times, such as Sodom and Gomorrah, the Tower of Babel, and so on and so forth. How do you go down if you're already there? And it just falls on deaf ears. I never get an answer because they don't have an answer. No expert has an answer. They go down because they're in crafts. And when people say, I believe in the God of the Bible, I say, which God? Because there are multiple gods. This is a place where we screwed up. Elohim, plural, was mentioned some 2,000 plus times. It was Elohim who created the earth and the heavens, and Elohim was plural, and it was male and female. So there you have it. And it was a man's world back then, so everything became, one male God. And that's the mantra we created, and that's the mantra we've been, perpetrating for the last 1,600 years since Jerome, put together the Latin Vulgate, is this one man, one God, one lifetime. Got to get it right, got to be saved, got to be born again, got to be baptized to get to heaven. And once you're in heaven, you're walking on, the streets of gold through the pearly gates the rest of your life. Wrong, 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 and wrong. That's what I've come up with from doing my own studies over the years. None of us die. We've been alive before. And actually, reincarnation was an accepted tenet in the early church for 200 years. Origen, one of the early church fathers, had some Greek background, worked with Clement of Alexandria. He was called the brightest church, or the brightest mind the early church ever had. And he believed in reincarnation. And it was an okay subject to talk about in the early church, but it got weeded out because the church wanted to create, the power for itself. And everything I've previously said is what lent power to the church. And the church ended up getting very corrupt. And that's basically what, created the Protestant Reformation. Now, the rest of your question. There are all kinds of UFOs in the Bible, or what we would call crafts. I normally start out by saying that, chariots of fire are crafts, without a doubt. So you have all the references to Elijah being picked up by a chariot of fire. And if you look in Zechariah 6, I've learned that these chariots can also be called spirits. Spirit, that's right. So one of the ways to look at crafts in the Bible is to examine the word spirit every time you see it, because it may mean a person that you can't see, or it may mean a craft that the person is riding in. Example, Revelation chapter 4. John sees this door open in heaven. And I have read this so many times and passed over it, and nobody really brought it, to the attention. But he's called up into the Spirit. He's not called up in spirit. He's called up into the Spirit. And that is in every translation that I have seen, including the Koine Greek. And what happens? He sees someone sitting on a throne, and he's flown around the heavens, and we get the details of, the woman and giving birth and whatnot that he sees when he's flying around. Another place is really good is for cloaked craft is Elisha in Second Kings. I think that's chapter 6 as well. Elisha, not Elijah, but Elisha prayed, and his servant who there was with him could not see what Elisha could see. But because Elisha prayed for his servant to have his eyes opened, his eyes were opened. And all around Elijah were these chariots of fire up in the mountains and all around. And he could not see them before because they were cloaked to him. And another good place, and this will be the third one I'll give out, is the Song of Deborah and Barak in Judges 5. We read that the stars fought from heaven. Well, how do stars fight from heaven? I mean, that's the first question that comes to your mind. From their paths, they fought against Sisera. And in verse 23, it's curse Meroz, said the angel of the Lord, utterly curse its inhabitants, because they did not come to the help of the Lord. Now, when does the Lord need help? Well, the Old Testament God is often referred to as Lord, and that's a whole nother story on who the Lord is. The Old Testament God is no longer my God. But this Meroz, Meroz, is open for debate. There's two lines of thought. One is that it's a geographical place outside Jerusalem. No one actually knows where it was or is. Some say it might have been Mount Tabor. Some say it was literally outside the gates of Jerusalem. We don't know. Others, such as Rabbi Kaplan, Rabbi Shearson, both whom I agree with, as well as the Talmud, indicate that Meroz is a celestial planet. That phrase is referring to the inhabitants of that planet did not come to help the Lord. And that ties right in to the stars fighting from heaven. So there you have some places where you sense that we're A, not alone, and B, that there are, crafts in the Bible. These chariots of gods, they're in the thousands, according to Psalm 68. There's thousands of them, myriads. So you really start in Genesis and end up in Revelation, and they're all the way through there. And you had mentioned Ezekiel. That's probably the preeminent one, the craft that he saw. And it's very interesting, the description of what Ezekiel saw sitting on the throne is very, very similar to what John saw on the throne in Revelation. And I have that in my book also. The similarities are pretty distinct and pretty impressive.
I know you in God versus God, you said it took you 2 years to write that, and I know you go very deep, and I have to wrap my mind around some of this stuff and reread it over and over. Uh, but I know you're saying something about God setting up lawn on someone else's property or something like that. What I know there's a lot to it, and it's complex, and you could probably go on and on forever about it. But what do you mean by God versus God, and what can you tell us about that chapter? That embodies it.
Well, when I wrote my first book, Jeffrey, the Old Testament God was still my God. So this has morphed. My beliefs have morphed since then. After I wrote my first book, I got to meet Reverend Michael Carter, who convinced me I'm on a path, a spiritual path, and that has turned out to be very true. I have left the gates of Western Christianity. I have found many, many, many new truths, and it's been freedom in spades in the process. I've done a lot of study on Yahweh, um, which is the God of the Old Testament. And there there's things you need to consider. Do you want your God to be responsible for killing thousands upon thousands upon thousands of women and children, as what's depicted in the Bible? Hittites, etc., all, mercifully murdered. Amorites, just on and on and on. And this God walks. I mean, there's one place in Exodus where he lands and gets out of his craft, and I'm inserting that, by the way, because he does come down and then it starts walking, and these people just don't fall out of the sky when they come down. He's looking for Moses. He doesn't know where he is. He's looking for him. And Moses and Zipporah and their son were actually at an inn. And this is after Moses had been chosen to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And he finally finds them. He knocks on the door, and Zipporah answers. And Yahweh says, I'm here to murder Moses. And if it wasn't for Zipporah's quick thinking, let's just say that didn't happen, and Yahweh changed his mind. So there you have one of the several places where this God changes his mind. This God flies in a ship. This God kills people. He says he's jealous, and he is jealous, and that can't be my God, because that's in direct conflict with who God is in the New Testament. God in the New Testament is love, is light, and is spirit. Those are the three descriptions. And Jesus himself never called Yahweh his father. We need to get that out right now. And Yahweh, preached fear, which some interpret as respect. But Jesus made a point to say he comes here not as in fear, but as in love. And it's like we have two different gods. You have Jesus, who purports, or many purport to be God, and then you have the Old Testament God Yahweh, which the church has molded into becoming the God of the universe. That everything was made from Him, and that is wrong on multiple fronts. First of all, as I've mentioned, there's multiple gods. My God in the New Testament, because he is spirit, light, and love, has no sex. He is sexless. So why do we call God him? And then it's male and females were the ones that created the earth, and they came in crafts. So is that really God? Who's their God? So my God is something completely different now from the Old Testament. And this Yahweh God, there's a couple lines of thought on just who he was. He may have been the god of the Kenites, which was a copper smelting group, or he may have been the god of the Shasu, which basically were cattle nomads in the area. And this was even depicted in some writings in Egypt, that Yahweh was the god of the Shasu. Point being, he was a local god, not a universal God. That's a good point we need to throw out. You do some more homework, which I've done a lot of work, and there's not a lot of information available today due to time, ravages of fire, theft, and age and whatnot. But what information is still available going back that far basically has come out of Syria. At this point, I want to say that a lot of people can remember Jacob. And Jacob was told to go to Bethel and build an altar to the God who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau. Now, this is Yahweh saying to Jacob, go build an altar to the God. This is somebody else, not to me, but to the God who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau. And in Joshua, this altar that Jacob makes is not made to Yahweh, it's made to El, E-L, and he called it Bethel, meaning house of God. So that's either referring to Elohim or it's referring to El. One line of thought says that El was the chief Canaanite god, not Yahweh, but El. And this is where I fall in line with. El was the chief Canaanite god, not Yahweh. El had 70 children, 70. Each of them were given plots of land. Now, before our listeners say, well, that's hogwash. Well, no, it's not. Local gods were everywhere back then. You would cross a river, you would cross a mountain, you would cross a creek, you would be in another god's territory. This is played out in the Old Testament as well. I think Joshua 24 says there's a river of the gods. You have to leave your God behind, and you cross the river, and you'll serve this God. Each of these little gods that had their property served El. And Yahweh had his piece of property, which was in what we might consider modern day Israel, and that was his part. Am I going too far?
Yeah, no, you're good, and I understand what you mean. I was, born in Georgia. My father was a preacher and very strict, and he passed from a heart attack. But I understand about the rigidness that I've seen, living under that guise.
Well,
But
I have preached as well, and I'm also ordained. I mean, I had fallen in hook, line, sinker, rod, and reel with what is taught in mainstream Christianity.
yeah,
But backing up and seeing the craft and now doing my own homework, I realized that the rabbis, the preachers, the fathers, the priest, they're doing what they have been taught to do, and they're trying to do something good for society. So bless them all. But they're exposing or espousing what they've been taught, and what they've been taught is the
yeah,
same thing that the early church created, and that is still taught in theology schools today. And
definitely.
it's not right.
I had Neil Donald Walsh on. He does those Conversations with God books. Those books kind of help me not see God as such a jerk. It seemed a little more, more able to grasp a hold of than what I was taught on so many
Oh,
different
oh,
levels.
definitely. God for me now is something completely different. And something is not the right word to
It's like a
say.
positive force,
Exactly.
like the Star Wars baby. That's right, the
Exactly.
Force.
And that force is full of love. That is what permeates everything in the universe.
Yes.
Love.
And one thing I saw something about this on Facebook about Bigfoot, and I have a book on Bigfoot. It's just like written interviews I've did from the show with people and stuff like that. So we've heard a lot of different things. But do you think Bigfoot ties in the Nephilim or Sons of Cain or any of that kind of stuff at all in your research?
I've given a little bit of thought to that, and my answer would have it's not clear cut. Sorry, if you're looking for a
Yeah,
clear cut answer, I'm going to say possibly.
yeah,
The reports of the orbs and crafts and some of the Bigfoots, they have the ability to, I guess you would say, cloak or disappear or fade into
yes,
nothingness, become a
yes.
spiritual being. Maybe you see them just for a little bit and then they're not there. Makes you wonder. Makes you wonder. Now I've read other reports that the sons of Cain. That's another good point. Who did Cain marry? If you're taught that there's Adam and Eve, and then there's Abel, and then there's
Lilith,
Cain.
that story, that
There
weird.
you go. There you go. And there were definitely people outside the Garden of Eden. In fact, many of the scriptures that did not make it in the Bible have this Garden of Eden actually on a mountaintop. And that's one of the reasons the genealogy, the first 10 going up to Noah, that were so special that he wanted to keep them all up there. If you left the mountaintop, you'd be into the land of the heathens. And that's where Cain was, expelled to, was the land of the heathens. So there were already people there. But but to get back to your point on Bigfoot, the answer is possibly.
Yeah, I've wondered
Another
if they're
thing I've
left
read
over
was
from the flood and stuff.
that people that in the Far East that can't grow beards and whatnot, they're the sons of Cain. Well, I don't know anything. Maybe not, but I've read several articles on that as well.
I saw recently that missing 411 UFO connection, the David Paulides stuff, and I've interviewed him a few times. It's been a while. But in that, there's some pretty creepy proof that possibly UFOs are taking people. And he used to not ever talk about paranormal stuff ever. I did a written interview and he made me admit a Bigfoot question. And he said, I can't ask that. People will think I'm crazy. But lately, I mean, he's put out books on Bigfoot and then he got into this missing 411 crazy stuff. And I'm not saying every one of those cases is something paranormal taking people, but there's definitely some weirdness to them that'll creep you out and make you start thinking that something's taking people from the woods. But in UFO Connection, the newest documentary, now he's embracing the paranormal more. And the last one he did, there was some kind of cloak thing in a tree when some people went missing in a UFO. So now he's kind of open, but UFO Connection, he's pretty much saying that there's not every case, but there's some that UFOs are taking people, and some of the natives, it's known that has happened. But a creepy thing, in that movie, that documentary, there was a guy, and I forget his name, but he was like this older dude that's worked most of his life. He had an encounter. He was in the papers and stuff. He passed the lie detector test 4 times, and he basically seemed pretty legit. But he said he went into a craft. He said they put him back because he had a vasectomy. And every person else who got taken had no reproductive problems or anything. They didn't come back or they never got found. But it kind of creeped me out because I had been through testicular cancer and lost one in the war. And I had a UFO sighting with a big triangle craft and power lines, and a ball came out towards me, and a friend of mine saw it with me, and years later I asked him, he's like, I don't know, I don't remember it. It's like, you were right there. That's one of those situations where you're like, did they take me? If so, I don't remember a damn thing. But I wonder, when they said they put him back for a vasectomy, I was like, did they throw me back? Like, they're taking people. There's something to it. But those movies, not to say everything's legit in those, but he's, a cop and has a pretty good background and everything. He's got his flaws, of course, like anyone. And I've heard he's grumpy sometimes, and he's been grumpy to me. But the point is, those are really weird in a lot of cases where the FBI get involved, and they're just people really vanishing in weird ways. Like, they'll find their gun in one area with a jacket and then find the pistol like on a mountain far
Miles
away.
away.
Yeah.
Miles away.
What I have to hear what have you thought about some of this stuff, your mind and intelligence? I'm just kind of curious. What do you think about some of it?
Well, having studied a lot about what is termed as the secret government, I think you can go back to the days of Truman and Eisenhower, and I believe they are allowed to take so many people in exchange for not exposing themselves publicly. I think we've signed some kind of an agreement, perhaps, where they can take so many thousands of people for
I've heard stuff about that. Yeah,
reproductive studies and an initiative to create hybrids. I'm pretty sure that's the main gist of what's happening is creating hybrids. And there's been so many cases of people having dreams that they've seen incubation chambers, babies in liquid that are half alien looking and half human looking, and other people have had dreams where they've been taken into the craft and children come out and they realize that they're children. There's a lot to that.
Definitely.
And I do believe a lot of those people that say that's happened. this is one of the reasons, one of the myriad reasons why we don't have disclosure. Some of this stuff is so far out there that if it came out,
They go nuts.
oh, the whole world would just turn into chaos. Religion would have to change in a heartbeat, and would the banks would be frozen. There wouldn't be anything on the shelves at Walmart or Food Lion or anywhere. So
Well,
it would be chaos. And
yeah.
from that respect, Jeffrey, I think maybe the government's doing us a favor by keeping it hidden.
And
It's
there's
in our own
definitely a
best
lot of,
interest.
I mean, you look at Skinwalker Ranch, and I'm hearing that there's a bunch of ranches like that in Florida that I've had 3 different people tell me, but they won't tell me where because they can't talk about it. They're trying to talk about it anonymously. But these things are happening probably on so many ranches we couldn't even fathom it. But I know I've heard of 2 or 3 where I'm at in the Panhandle, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't need to know probably, but I know that people know about them. They just can't talk about it because the business, it'll hurt the business. So, and those things going on in that ranch, they seem like taking people and weird stuff, all kinds of different weirdness.
But at least it's okay to talk about now. I mean, 30 years ago, we would all be considered wackos if we talked about it.
Yeah, and just think, if it wasn't for testicular cancer, I might have been on planet Zanzibar as like a stud slave hoe or something like horrible. Like, that's terrifying.
No, they actually would take your sperm, and it's artificial insemination. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, then they eat you or something.
Well, there is a species out there that find humans quite delicious.
Oh man. Definitely. It's for sure. And I know you've had a lot of ancient alien commentators. Is that from the show or just like books or all of the above that have got involved with your book? I know you
Well,
interview them and stuff.
I'm not an ancient alien believer. I'm actually consider it fact. A fact is beyond belief. As I continue on this spiritual path that I'm on, I realize that the universe is full of life, and life comes in many different facets. And I wanted to expose some of the thoughts of several preachers, which I did in Within Grasp. There's 3 preachers in there.
And
I
I've
wanted
been
to
wanting to get Michael Carter on. That's pretty interesting for sure.
let me tell you, he's the real deal. And everybody I've talked to about him says he's the real deal. I've got to meet him in person. Actually went to his wedding not long ago. And let's just say he had a miraculous healing, and he's had several visitations, and I'll let it go at that. It's remarkable. And every word he says, I fully believe. And he's an active pastor now.
And it's kind of unusual for an African American to get into this subject. I've interviewed a couple, and they've passed away. I know Wham does collects cases of them, but I was just kind of curious. What did you guys talk about, and do you know what kind of got him into this? Was it that something happened? Like, did an experience happen to him?
Is that for me? That's that question for
Yeah,
me?
yeah. I was just asking
Well,
about Michael.
Yeah, he had a blood clot in his leg, and it was like an emergency. He ended up getting put on Coumarin and all the shots that you take in your stomach and all that, and it was not getting any better. And the size of his leg became the size of a basketball. One night, he and his wife were in bed, and he suddenly woke up and sensed somebody was in the room with him. And He looked over to the side, and here was this being standing there, dressed almost like in a monk robe. Had on a light blue shirt, but a long robe with a hood, and it scared him to death. Michael took the fetal position in bed, tried to wake up his wife, and she would not wake up. So he just went under the covers in the fetal position. After so many seconds or so, he looked back out, and the fella's still standing there. Nothing's happening, but the fella takes his hand out like this, and from the palm of his hand comes this lime or chartreuse green beam of light, for lack of better words, and hits him in the stomach. And then this guy fades away. Next morning, Michael's healed. The leg is back to normal size. He goes back to the doctor. The doctor could not believe it. And Michael wasn't about to tell, the doctor what happened. In fact, he tried to turn the tables on the doctor and said, "Well, aren't you happy for me that I'm well now?" And the doctor just was in awe. So that was his healing. The heparin and the coumarin was not working, and it was an instantaneous healing. And since then, he has had some visitations from some others, including even one by the Mantis people. So I have that in my book.
Yeah, those
He
Mantis
says it
things.
gets real quiet. I ask him, does he know when this is going to happen? He says it gets eerily quiet, and a different sense comes upon you, and that's when he knows a visitation is about to occur. So he's fully convinced, the universe is full of life as well. Beings, sentient beings, are everywhere. Some of them look like us, some look almost like us, and some don't look like us at all. But they all are able to communicate, most of them telepathically. Um, that's why I say we're still babes. That's in our future.
Those Mantis ones, they freak me out. Like that's I've never seen those, but that one
Well, they're
definitely.
considered very, very, very wise and very, very old. I'll
They're
tell you
considered,
what.
they're
Yeah, go
considered
ahead.
good. They're really good. I mean,
Uh-huh.
they're considered to be good. I mean, all the people that I've talked to, like several people who've had those experiences. I haven't, but universally, of all the people I've talked to, they've. I mean, the thought of a giant insect like being appearing to me freaks me out because I know how carnivorous, regular praying mantises are, but they all say that they're very peaceful and loving, and that's the kind of vibe you get from them. And so that's all I know about them.
Well, Linda Moulton Howe has written 2 books. I'm sure you all know
Oh yeah,
or have heard of her.
I know what her
And
stuff is.
her 2 books, contain a lot of that information, which I've found really, really good. So she's interviewed people that's had these encounters. I have not had any encounters, at least none that I can remember. I guess I'm like you in that regard, Jeffrey. I've had some dreams, but nothing involving other beings. I've had one dream where I was in an incubation chamber, and I actually could see babies inside multiple containers hooked up
Mhm.
to wires and tubes and whatnot. But that was just a dream, and that's all I've considered it. I couldn't make anything out of it. So,
Yeah, I've had some interesting experiences. One was 3 cloaked beings in the woods that were very small. I saw my friend Brian, and they were standing around a black box, and they reminded me of Jawas, but were skinny. They weren't like fat from the Jawa Star Wars, but they were skinny and smaller. And the black box always kind of creeps me out. But we both were like, "Do you see that?" Yes, I see that. Confirming that we both saw it because we just couldn't believe that it was there to begin with. But a cat jumped towards them and they vanished, like just kind of vanished. And that was, I had been reading some books on Celtic otherworld stuff, so who knows? It could have been the wee folk or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, what we call fairies.
Yeah, the Fae or something like that for sure. And the light beings, definitely, I've seen a few times. I've seen them in the heavens. I know in a Jeffrey Mishlove book, there's an astronomer that says some stars are indeed deities. I'm not sure I understand that completely, but there is weird stuff with some of the stars out there. You're like, is that a person up there? Like there's some strange things for sure with the stars. And there's been some other ones. One of my weirdest ones was here in Florida. I was walking down the street with a husky dog of mine I used to have, and a big orange rusty ball floated over the street. No chains hooked to it, nothing carrying it, just like a big, weird orange rusty ball, like it had been rusted from being in water. And I was like, is there a chain? Is there something carrying? There wasn't. That was a weird one for sure.
Did it just disappear?
Yeah, it just kind of like flew off and just kind of vanished. And then there's one time in Georgia, I had a lot of UFO sightings, and my mom saw pyramid crafts coming out of a hole in the sky that was orangish green, like energy. And like 3 came out of it. And she goes, "Oh my God, Jeffrey," it about yanked my arm off. And of course, she remembers it, but doesn't like to talk about it and just acts weird when you bring it up. But during that time, a type of weird vehicle came out that may have been a government agency. I don't really know. No one ever came face to face to me, but this weird, like silent craft, almost like a helicopter with no blades and like a front, like the glass cockpit, and a guy dressed like freaking Top Gun. And he goes like this and it shot up. And I don't know what that was. I mean, maybe they sent something out to see what was going on, but no one ever came up to me and tried to talk to me. I know one time a weird thing happened where someone I said I was going to turn my phone off, and then a mysterious $2,000 credit got on my phone bill to pay it. And I asked them to send me the check. They sent it. I paid my land taxes and went on a shopping spree. Someone put that on there to keep my phone on. And the only reason they would have do that is to show. That's the only interesting thing I do that would be weird, UFOs, for anybody to care. So I always wondered if it was like the government were trying to listen. Like I've been told they'd like to, spy on people that do UFO shows and stuff. Who knows? I'm sure there's some truth to that for sure.
But in this day and age, some of what we see is our own. I'm fully convinced of that. I mean,
yeah.
You can go back to the 90s on what it was said by I forget his name now. It used to run the Lockheed Skunk Works.
Bob Lazar.
No, Ben Rich.
Okay.
He was there when they created the the Blackbird and the U crafts, but he in the 90s he said we've already been to the stars. Ben Rich, that there was a mistake in the equation. We have that fixed, and we've already taken ET home. Now you think about that. And I'm fully convinced we've already been to the moon. We've already been beyond this solar system. I believe what Gary, McKinnon, when he hacked into the, let's just say the military and saw the Space Warden fleet, we've already been out there, guys. We're already out there now.
Yeah.
We already have anti-gravity. We already have the ability to go interstellar. And we've had that for decades.
I know I haven't seen it yet, but that James Fox, that UFO guy that's pretty well known, I know he has a documentary called Moment of Contact or something, but I want to see it. But supposedly it's about the Brazilians capturing an alien, and he did a whole documentary on it. I haven't seen it yet, but I'd like to.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard about that. Yes.
Sounds interesting for sure.
I mean, visitations have occurred around the world. I mean, and again, they go back, hundreds of years before Jesus Christ. Everybody thinks the UFO phenomenon started in 47, and then you had Roswell, but look what Ken and Barbara wrote in their book before Roswell. I mean, the big crash in New Mexico in 45 and going backwards, Cape Girardeau, Missouri in 41, Aurora, Texas in 1897, Nuremberg, Germany in 1561. These crafts have always been here. And the problem, I guess, what happened thousands of years ago was misinterpretation of advanced technology. And we created these gods out of thin air. God really was not here. These were all space travelers that came to this planet, whether the Brahmanas or the Hindus or I mean, around the world. I mean, everybody came in crafts: Greek, Roman, Mexican, uh, Mesopotamia. They all came in crafts, and we made them into gods because they had supernatural, high technological, you know, powers that we did not understand. That's how these people got to be made into gods. So there again, that I've left that all behind. My God is totally spirit, totally light, and totally love now. And as Barbara DeLong would say, maybe think of it as maybe a sphere of plasmatic energy that is so big and so powerful and so bright it hurts your eyes to look at it, that transcends everything everywhere, that does not exist in time because time doesn't exist. That's who God is, and we're all a part of God. You're taught that Jesus Christ is the only Son of God. Well, that's not even biblical from their own Bible. Hebrews, Galatians, Romans, we're all sons of God. And there were sons of God back in Genesis 6 that came down to impregnate the women. Sons of God. There are multiple. We're all sons of God. We're all brothers and sisters. So I'm no more a son of God than Jesus Christ is. So therefore, I look at Jesus Christ not as my Savior, but as my mentor and as my brother. I look at him as my teacher, my rabbi, just like Mary Magdalene called him rabbi, like Nicodemus called him rabbi. Everybody called him rabbi. And that kind of gets looked over because the church wants you to think that he's your savior. And without him, you're not going to heaven. Guess what? Everybody goes to heaven.
So I got to ask, and it's with trepidation, is well, when it comes to, I've had Bill Bean on, a spiritual warfare minister, and he made some comment about Satan and making like having a lab, and some of these cryptids being part of that, like chimeras and stuff. And you can go through Greek mythology and all that stuff, and I've heard stuff like that too. But as far as when it comes to God and your evolution and perception of that and how it's grown, what about the dark side and dark forces? Do you think they're here, that there's some kind of concrete truth to reptilians and the devil, or has that evolved to something else? I know that's a lot. So,
Well, let's back up. There again, it's the church who makes Satan the devil. It's the church who makes you think that there's a good and a bad, and that Yahweh was good and that Satan was bad. But Satan was only responsible for killing 10 people. Yahweh was responsible for killing tens of thousands of people, including women and children in situ. And that's only in the books that were left in the Bible. If you go into Jubilees, Jasher, and some of the other books that aren't in the Bible, this Yahweh character is responsible for millions of deaths. Now, who do you want to be your God out of those two? Now, think about this. The oldest book in the Bible, it's not Genesis, it's Job. Here we start at the beginning. Satan and Yahweh are almost on equal terms. That's what you get from reading that. Satan is walking on the earth, and it's Yahweh and Satan that get into this bet and use poor Job, as a whipping boy.
It's a
But
weird story.
Job is Yahweh's, you know, son. Y'all, we want to think it's his son. It's his um, follower. Let's put it that way, follower. And but he's used as a bet, and that bet was a life and death situation.
Yep.
And you're often looked at the book of Job as something that it's not. I look at it as what happened to Job's children because of the bet. They were killed.
Yep.
And then what happens at the end? They get replaced. But what happened to the initial children? Are you telling me the initial children can be replaced with 10 new children? What about your firstborn? And then not only this, we're taught that material things don't get you into heaven, but Job was rewarded with double his material items, as if
Yeah.
that's going to fix it. I mean, it's wacky. It's wacky, and I'm not so sure that the Satan is malevolent.
It's kind of like low key.
Yahweh's the one who
Yeah.
was that had to have the always that was jealous, had to have the Israelites because he was jealous. And Yahweh was the one who stayed behind. And a lot of these other lesser gods, Baal was one who may have been Satan, Marduk, the list goes on, have all gone off to other and better things because there's so many other worlds out there. It was Yahweh that stuck around and really tried to take his Israelites into Israel and make them into, I guess, a group of people that would just fall down on their face and worship him regardless. And I have a big problem with that now.
And you can see where they stole some Loki and Pan stuff for the devil for sure. Like through through the ages, they definitely stole some Loki and Pan to make that image and stuff.
But I do believe that there is some evil out in the universe. Not every being is malevolent, but some are evil, and there is an evil force out there, and it actually is acknowledged by some of these other beings that there is
The
an
dark
evil out
side.
there. That's brought out in Linda Moulton Howell's books as well, and
Yeah.
that's where I got that from.
Yeah.
But they
Just
will
look at like
acknowledge that there's evil out there. It's almost like you say with Star Wars. There's
yeah.
the light and the
It's like
darkness.
bring up like Jeffrey Dahmer. That's like
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you were sitting in his room and he was messing with you, that's like the devil in your room with you, pretty much.
You
It's
got it.
terrifying for sure. Definitely, I think it's like an ego force or just I don't know, just negative energy or something that.
I like darkness because God is so good and God is light, and we're light beings. That darkness is almost like a light sucker. It sucks the light out of you if
Well,
you head
yeah.
towards the darkness.
There's something to the light. I mean, you said that Michael's beings were light glowing, and I've seen those beings. I've had weird experiences where at a house me and Christina were at, there's times I can close my eyes and let the white light of the sun kind of like meditate on it, that
Hmm.
energy. And I've walked into this house and I saw like an astral gray being standing over a lady she was doing a hospice care for, and it turned and looked at me, and it was like not physical. It was like kind of a pink. At first, I thought it was just sunspots like you would see from a camera or whatever, but no, it was a little more defined. It was almost like the sun somehow gave me that vision to see it. And Christina saw one standing over the bed one night over me that she said was kind of insect and weird that creeped her out. She said it seemed parasitical. I don't really know, but there's definitely something to the light and the sun It's like there's, and I don't know if that's a divine manifestation of God or something. There's definitely something to it for sure. you know, uh,
You've had quite a few encounters then, Jeffrey, haven't you?
yes, I
How,
have.
m- how
Yes.
many how many years have these encounters eclipsed?
Well, I'm 48 now. I've had them since uh, seemed to start when I went through chemo and stuff. Like I would have dreams of a medicine man coming to me and doing like a ritual, like a shaman when I was like 17 or 16 going through that. And it kind of, when my dad passed, I think a lot of those experiences too was him trying to contact from the other side. And he may have been one of the light beings. I don't know for sure. But yeah, I'm early 20s. And since I think it was like a shamanic death going through all that garbage. It was definitely painful
Hmm.
for sure, yeah, for no doubt about it. The chemo and all that stuff. There's something to it, but yeah, since my early 20s, they don't happen quite as frequently now, but some of them do, but not like none of my Goldie oldies. I call them the big UFO ones. I haven't seen anything huge like that where they're like one looks like it seems like it's parked over your house wherever you move to. That used to happen in my younger days. Sometimes I'll see weird stuff in the sky, but not like that. And then a few years ago was when I had the light experience and did see some of the gray light beings. And I had a friend that was an atheist, and after I lived with him for a while, and he had dreams of aliens taking me out the window. He was not an atheist anymore for some reason after that. So I've had a lot of weird stuff like that, but I still don't know if they take me. Maybe
So
I
so I
always
have
talk
a
astral.
question for you.
Okay,
Have you had yourself checked for an implant?
I never have. I've wondered it, or felt a weird feeling in my body, or like was that something weird in me? But I've never had anybody check. No.
I was just curious.
I've thought about hypnosis and stuff, but I've never did it, or just haven't found anyone to be careful with that kind of stuff for sure. Uh, but I know things have happened because I've seen it. But as far as actually being taken physically, I don't know. It's a possibility, but I also think they mess with you or work with you on a when you sleep and stuff too. There's something to that,
Sure. I
Astral.
believe your brain waves are more in tune to intercepting some of their messages when you're asleep.
Definitely. And what about Enoch? I see a lot of stuff about Antarctica and Enoch and fallen angels imprisonated under Antarctica. I don't know where any of that stuff comes from, but what's up? What's the scoop on Enoch? That's a big one I know, but
Well,
it ties into a lot of the conspiracy UFO stuff. I know a lot of the stuff I see in like exopolitics and stuff.
are you asking me, I guess to start off, who was Enoch?
Yeah, and have you heard anything about the Antarctica connection? I've seen some articles about
Well,
that.
I, my Antarctica connection for me falls more in line with the Nazis than it does with Enoch. Enoch for me was the seventh, removed, uh, or the seventh in line, who was taken up and shown the heavens and whatnot, and and the whole he's written several books, and one is in the um, appendix of Within Grasp. If you're a devout Christian, you need to read the book of Enoch. It answers many questions that are brought up when you read the Bible, and it helps you really realize that there are levels in heaven. It helps you realize who the Grigari were, uh, uh, the people that came down to impregnate the women in Genesis 6. It helps you realize what happens to people who have not, let's say, people like Jeffrey Dahmer or Hitler, people like that, and what happens to general people like us when we go to level 3. And that's mentioned in Corinthians, by the way, when Paul knew this person that went up in heaven to the third heaven. That's where we all go, by the way, when we die. And it answers so many questions about angels and whatnot. So I
I've
highly
listened
recommend
to
that.
it. I've listened to it on like an audio on YouTube, and it's definitely interesting. It's something you got to kind of listen to more than once. It's strange.
Well,
It's definitely
even
different.
all the angels are named, so that it's just, and they each have, each have their responsibilities to do. But I have to segregate that in Antarctica in my brain, because without a doubt, there's stuff going on in Antarctica that is not made public. You go, I guess the first thing you realize was, did Hitler escape, or was he really killed in World War II? Without a doubt, Nazis were everywhere in Chile and Argentina and possibly Paraguay. I mean, how did they get down there? Why were they down there? There was a direct line between Norway and Argentina and Antarctica. Why Antarctica? That's a good question. I believe that the Germans had help in developing some of their crafts. That even was mentioned by Hermann Oberth, that they had help, and that help was not of this world. Where would this help have been, and where are they doing this work? It's underground in Antarctica. So after World War II, why did we send an entire fleet to Antarctica? This was 1947. High jump, Project High Jump. Why did we send them down to Antarctica, of all places? The war's over. Well, we sent them down there because we knew that there was a Nazi base, and that there were crafts being worked on, that the Germans had mastered anti-grav, and that there was an underground base. That's why we went down there. And that's what was meant when Admiral Byrd said they came up out of the ocean so fast we couldn't track them. We couldn't shoot them down. We went home with our tails between our legs, utterly defeated. This was 47, year and a half after the war. So we've had all this going on down there since then. And there's been so many reports of people that have gotten, let's say, lost, and have gotten picked up, and they're afraid to say anything. There's a big area down there no one's allowed to fly over to this day. That you've got to take into mind what Admiral Byrd said, that there was a hole in the ground down there that he could see. For me, there's underground base and there's underground structures that go back many, many, many years. I mean, we're talking millennia.
Yep.
And there's even a part of me that says Antarctica may partially have been Atlantis. I just don't know that, but there's a part of me that says that. We know it was not covered in ice forever. The ice is relatively new, geologically speaking. And we know that our planet now wobbles and tilts where it did not in the past. So things have
Yep.
changed.
Definitely.
But there's stuff going on down there now that if you want to follow, a lot of the expositors, people have written books of what's going on now.
I've had Lynn Caston on. I know he
Well, there's
thinks they're
one.
still running the show. Some of it's kind of hard to swallow, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there's something going on with it. I don't know.
I mean,
But
that's how I view Antarctica now. I make a statement that's something to watch out for.
definitely.
There's stuff going on down there right now, and has been for, I don't know, 80, 90 years.
I always think of that Lovecraft story, Mountains of Madness, and all that. Thinking The Thing, John Carpenter, Kurt Russell, and all
Thing.
that. Yeah,
Yep. That's a classic.
Yeah, that is for sure. That definitely is. They Live. That's a weird one that John Carpenter did with the glasses, the sunglasses. Roddy Piper, we see the aliens. That's definitely a weird one. It's like, somebody's up to something with these things. So I was going to ask Wham, when it comes to UFO Bible stuff, what's one that stands out to you that you remember or think of when you first think about it? I always think of
Oh, well, I don't know. I don't really think of the Bible that way because I don't think about the Bible anymore. Um, but I guess I remember a couple of things. There's the whole pillar of fire business that leads the children of Israel
It's a
um,
craft.
through, well, whatever it is. I don't care whether it's a craft or not. I'm just really not interested in those questions. I do remember. Um, I do remember. There's this one. There's this one scene. I think it's in Exodus, um, where this is after Moses has gone to up to Sinai, comes back down. I mean, I don't remember the whole sequence now anymore, but he comes back down, and he he's going to go back up there, and he invites a whole bunch of the elders of the Israelites up there with him, and so they all go up there on and they have. I remember I was taking a Hebrew Bible study class. This is in graduate school years and years ago, and um, we were actually reading the text in Hebrew, and along with commentaries about it from the Talmud, where they kind of try to explain some of the weird stuff that's in the text.
They had a banquet.
Well, that was later. Before they had the banquet, they had a God sighting. This is actually what my professor rabbi told me. He said this is a God sighting, and this isn't always translated this way, but in the Hebrew, what's really interesting is that it's almost like it's like they're all sitting there. It's like God appears to them, right? So the way the text is the text is, it kind of pans up God. It starts with his feet, and then and then his legs. It pans up. But what's really interesting is if you read the text really carefully, it skips over the place where his genitals would be in the Hebrew. It just skips over it. It's like it goes, up his loins, and then boop, that it's his torso. It's like, and there's a lot of commentary in the Talmud about that, about why God's genitals aren't seen, why that's elided in the text. And so that always created this really interesting conversation because, there was actually a book that was written about that, just about that particular sighting. It's like, and then after they have God sighting, then they all have a big banquet, then they all eat and everything, because that's what, this is what my professor said. He said, because, in Jewish tradition, after you have a big religious thing, you eat. That's what you do. So, which sounds fine to me, see God, eat food. So I guess that's sort of one of those things that I think about, because the religious significance that traditionally was gotten out of that by the Talmud was this admission that even though humans were created in God's image, which is kind of what Genesis says in the beginning, that this is kind of a way by which the text kind of implies that that's true. We were created in God's image, but God isn't like us. God doesn't have, I guess, naughty bits, if you want to put it that way. God doesn't have naughty bits, which implies that God is something different than us in some way. And so then, a lot of the discussion would be like, well, what that difference would be, that God doesn't have naughty bits. But anyway, so that's sort of what I guess one interpretation of that would be God is an extraterrestrial. whatever. I don't care about this stuff anymore. None of this stuff interests me. So
Yeah, I know when like Neil Donald Walsh, he says God doesn't like, I guess what's the word, have needs, or like we try to make him like, like he's just like us when it comes to, being a brat. He's not like that. He's on a higher plane. It's a
well,
positive energy.
yeah, I mean, and in fact, a lot of things. I mean, I think that I was raised a really conservative Christian. With the sort of what I refer to them as Bible enemas. And so, I know the Bible really well, or I knew it really well at one time. And so that's part of the reason I went and got, a master's in religious studies and learned to read Hebrew. And, and one of the things that I did learn was that sort of the classic Christian understanding of the God in the Hebrew Bible, sort of the theological understanding there, where you have the Old and New Testament and stuff, that in many ways that's based on some kind of poor translations. Like when Jerome did his Latin and all of that kind of stuff. And even going from, the Hebrew to the Septuagint, there were some issues there. That's to Greek, were some issues there. So it's, a big part of the rabbinic tradition, that created the Talmud, or out of which the Talmud came, a big part of that has for a long time not accepted that view of God, that God is this anthropomorphic, crazy, jealous weirdo. That is because that's just not what I was taught by these Jewish rabbis. It's just, this was the understanding of God that the people who wrote the book had at the time. It does not reflect the actual nature of God, and this is not what most Jews believe anyway anymore. So, it was interesting. It sort of changed my understanding of what all that was. And, I mean, the way he put it is of course Yahweh killed all these people, because if you go back and you look at the war gods in the Middle East at the time, that's what war gods who protect their people do. And a lot of that is sort of like, if you go to like what the Assyrian gods say, what the gods like Marduk say, this is kind of like in the tradition of boasting. I've killed so many people, and this is the way I can protect you. So, there's like the rabbis were like really cautioning this is not the way Jewish people see God now, not traditionally, not since the fall of the Second Temple and the Bar Kokhba rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so, I mean, my understanding of all of that changed a lot. I mean, I read Barry Downing and looked at all of that stuff along many, many years ago. Probably, I don't know, it was like in the 80s or something. I was reading a lot about that. Because Donikin was writing like in the 60s or something.
Right.
And so, I mean, I was reading that stuff a long time ago. And it was interesting to me, but at the same time, I'm like, I was at the point at that time in my life where it was like, why do I need to worry about the Bible anyway? I don't accept this. I don't accept this as my framework. It's not significant to me anymore. So I just, of course there would be UFOs or unknown things, that would be talked about in the Bible, because all scriptures on the planet have instances of this, because people have been seeing things in the sky as long as we've been around. So I just decided, as Jeffrey knows, I just decided to go to people who have continued to maintain traditions about these things without the benefit of text, and live in living traditions with things like this, like some of the indigenous people that I've studied with and stuff like that. I just don't worry about it. It's like, well, of course the Bible says this stuff because everything says this stuff. So it's just that, whatever. I also, I've read I've read almost everything that has to do with, the theories of where these beings come from and what they're here for and everything. And I guess I've developed my own understandings of these things. I actually am really radical personally in that I don't believe that outer space exists. I don't believe that there's anything out there. We're all in it. It's not out there. Okay, we're in it. So the distances of the planets are an artifact. It's an artifact of perception, and so and the artifact of perception is produced by our own kind of ego focus. So the notion of distance, or the notion of where space time and collapse together in kind of like one formula. The notion that anything is exterior to us, kind of in a radical sense. I'm not saying we don't have experiences that seem that way. We do, but that's not what reality is. So I've had scads of experiences. I had some experiences just the other night. I haven't encountered beings in quite the same way that Jeffrey does. Jeffrey knows this. I mean, I've heard Jeffrey tell all of his stories. I still like the little beings that the cats jumped at.
I found that cat dead later too. I don't know if they did it, but a farmer did it.
But but I've had some. I haven't had like waking experiences quite like that, but I've had a lot of experiences where I've like clearly entered, like in a conscious state, clearly entered into like another plane somewhere, and have been able to have really interesting experiences of time being compressed, speeded up. I've had experiences where in front of me, the matrix has changed, boom, and something that was here is now over there, because I've entered into a different reality. So I don't. I live in this world in great discomfort because I know I don't belong here. So for me,
it's not a 5-star hotel.
No, this is not a 5-star hotel for me. And I have my own sense and my understanding of why I'm here and why it's going to be perfectly okay for me when it's time to go. I mean, I'm not like running to do that or anything, because I know that there are consequences to that. But it's like,
it's weird.
This is not my home planet. I'll put it or not my home world. So
you're really a space amoeba. No.
Well, no, I am, and many of us are. I mean, some of us are from this arena right around in here. I'm really from probably several. Not all of us have one soul. So I have lots of different ways of understanding these things, but that's just sort of like what I'm talking about at the moment. I try really hard not to believe too much of what I think.
The Bible for me is just another book now, so we can concur on that. I don't hold it as in high esteem as I did 6 years ago. And time and distance, I totally agree with you, is irrelevant. There is no time, and I believe the distance is something we fabricate in our mind. So from that standpoint, I can relate to what you're saying when you say we're all in this and there is no out there.
Well,
I've
and
just
it's
never heard it phrased that way, but it makes sense
right.
to me.
Well, and if that's the case, then it's perfectly conceivable that various of us, various of people who may identify as human, um, may have found themselves off what we would call planet at any given time. And it may not be as difficult to do that as we think.
Hmm.
Because I've always thought that the real issue, I mean, and I've not always thought this, but I've come to believe that the real issue surrounding disclosure does not have to deal so much with secret deals or anything like that. It really has to do with it. It really has to do with hiding what the true nature of consciousness is. Because if all human beings, if our civilization were to understand how this world that we're in is created, and the part that they're playing to create it, and how important it is for that focus to be controlled by certain folks, whoever they are, in order that a status quo is maintained. Because all you have to do is just sort of not, turn your mind away from it, and everything changes. You know, um, if people really knew how powerful we were individually, that would change the world. And that's exactly what whoever it is doesn't want. People are afraid of change. They're afraid. It can be simple fear, and it can be fear of losing power. I mean, it can be a lot of different things. People don't have, it doesn't have to be one motive, because all you have to do is have separate groups of people who have different motives, but those motives converge. The interest converges in a certain area of control and power. And then it's like, it looks like a conspiracy, and it kind of is, but it's also very networked. You know what I mean? So, what's the difference between a network and a conspiracy? Well, it's a matter of whether you're in the network or not. It's really that simple. If you don't feel like you're in the network, then you feel like it's a conspiracy, because that's how it feels. That's the experience of it. So to me, disclosure is probably simpler. And a lot of the stories we tell around that have to do with little pieces that we know that we're trying to fit together in a narrative. But the fact is that we don't really know exactly how they fit together yet. But tune in tomorrow, and I may be grumpy and feeling a different way. So it's
For some reason lately, I've thought about that show V that came on like back in did you see it with the reptilians?
I know exactly what
that
show
is
you're
a weird damn show to come on network television about
that
aliens
was
that
a
want
very
water and then they eat us. Robert
strange
England
show.
was a nice reptilian. What did he eat? He was nice, but did he still eat us? Like they never really said. But I have a figure. It looks like a Ken doll, but it has a reptilian head. They sold figures of that show. Just a weird, and the whole thing's about aliens taking people. It's just kind of creepy the way they interjected that into our, childhoods as action figures. And then on it, ABC or NBC, I don't remember which one, but it was well made. And there's books too that are really weird, like a bunch of paperbacks and stuff. But Wallace, when it comes to everything you talk about, what's your favorite thing to talk about? Is there something in particular that gets your goat going more than others? I know there's a lot of different things, probably.
Boy, that I've never been asked that question before. My
Ooh,
favorite thing to talk about probably now, as I'm still on this path, still experiencing new truths. Learned the difference between prayer and meditation. I've learned that for me, My purpose for being on this planet at this time is to learn how to love everybody. And that's a huge statement to make, but I'm fully convinced that is my purpose now, is to learn how to love even the people you don't like, even the Hitlers of the world. How do you love somebody like that? But
Well, you
the
don't have
topic.
to. You don't have to go up and snuggle with him.
True.
Yeah,
It's like it's like it's like forgiveness. You can forgive someone, but doesn't mean you're gonna still hang out with a
Yeah,
pedo or
there's a
whatever.
difference between
Yeah.
forgiveness and forgetfulness too. And do you forget when you forgive? But for me right now, probably the topic of all these things that interest me the most are near death experiences and shared death experiences, uh, gleaning and getting glimpses of what it's like going back to our state, which is spiritual, and what happens, when we're back there, and uh, things of that nature. Let me put it that way. I'm fully convinced that of course we don't die, and that our spirit lives eternally, and that we will be in other bodies. There's no way to guarantee that it would be on this planet or in a human-like body. So I can relate to what Ram says. Wham says that she doesn't belong here, or is questioning why she's here. Um, you're here because you were sent here, and it's
no, no, no,
you.
no. I'm here because I chose to be here.
Ah, well, I was going
And,
to say that you may have a say so in where you go, but that begs the question on why did you come here then?
well, I'm pretty clear actually about why I came here. Um, in this focus self, which is how I refer to the personality here, is my focus self. I'm pretty clear that, I'm pretty clear about this most of the time. I'm pretty clear that I'm here to to finalize certain experiences as a human being that have not been resolved in some of my other aspects, and to sort of pull certain experiences together, that have sort of been loose ends, I guess is the best way to put it. And so, what my challenge has been, and to do that very consciously, not sort of ad hoc, but very consciously, so that what my challenge has been, because this is the challenge that humans have, this is the challenge of being human, I think, or one of them, is that, humans, because of our focus, we get attached to outcomes. And you can get attached to a negative outcome or a positive outcome. It doesn't really matter. People can get just as attached to pain as they can to love. They just, it depends on what they identify with. And so my challenge in this life has been not to identify myself with any particular outcome or any particular um, uh, goal. So that is here. So, for example, early in my life, I had lots of traumas. I came from an incredibly traumatic background, and where I was sexually assaulted at the age of 4 by my father. All kinds of stuff like that. And I've had a lot of really difficult experiences, which I've talked about on the show from time to time. I've had a serial killer touch my life twice. I've experienced death way more than the average person, like actually dealing with dead people, murders, suicides, of loved ones, things like that, and a lot of physical trauma, a lot of accidents, a lot of illness. I've almost died 3 times, so stuff like that. And but I've also had some really incredible experiences, really amazing, enlightenment experiences, spiritual experiences, incredible experiences of love, and so it's like the whole gamut of stuff. And so my challenge, of course, as a human being is not to become too attached to any of these experiences in and of themselves. Because none of them are actually me in a way, it's almost like I've lived 7 lifetimes in one life. And that's part of what I mean by bringing all these sort of these loose ends together into one place. And it sounds kind of, when I try to describe it, it sounds kind of cold and analytical. It's not. I certainly haven't felt cold about those things when they've happened. But, the truth is that at the end of the day, whatever happens, I have to get up and go on. I have to get up and continue. I have to assemble the meaning it has for me, and what it's made me, so I can do really important things with people from time to time. So so that's sort of where why I think I came here. I mean, there are some very specific things, like I have a very strong sense that in other lives, since I believe all lives are lived simultaneously, other aspects of my being have been involved, or the larger being that I'm a part of have been involved in some really negative things. You know what I mean? Some really awful things. And that those things were kind of unresolved in those lives. And so me having these negative experiences in this life, some people would say that's a payback, but it's like, I'm not sure what retribution means to a 4-year-old who's being sexually assaulted. You know what I mean? I'm not sure that I would want to call that payback in a classic way. I think that it has more to do. There, my computer just did something weird. I think it has more to do with pulling these experiences together into a larger understanding of what all of these different kinds of lives can be, or mean together as a. I don't know if I'm making any sense now.
Yes.
But I mean,
Well,
for me,
if you were able to choose to come to this planet,
mm-hmm.
where I was told I needed to come here, that
Mm-hmm.
tells me that from my standpoint, you are getting close to ascension, that you are further along on your spiritual path than I am on mine.
Well, I have no idea about that, because I don't like those kinds of comparisons. I think those kinds of comparisons are not purposeful for me.
Well, I can understand that too, but for me, I want to be like Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's your goal. That's your goal. Yeah.
And that's my goal. But I'm heading in that direction, but I'm not ready to ascend yet. My conductor told me I needed to come to this world, and you're at the point where you've exceeded or have improved your consciousness, let me say, to the point where you and your conductor are more on an even kill basis, and you chose to come here, and he said okay. Does that make any sense?
Well, I guess the way I've looked at it is what the I'm not sure that I really liked the idea of coming here, but I think that I understood that it was necessary, and I think I had several choices, and part of the reason I chose to do it here is because the reader in this focus plane is very concentrated. So if you want to get a lot of work done, you can get a lot of work done. You just have to do the work. It's kind of like my astrological friend put. It's a he. This is how he put it. You know, physical reality is ruled by Saturn, and this is astrology talk, is ruled by Saturn, and of course, um, Jeffrey knows all about Saturn because Saturn rules Capricorn, right? It rules Aquarius to some degree, but Saturn is the arbiter of time, and Saturn is the arbiter of manifestation. And a lot of people think of Saturn as kind of like the taskmaster, the real negative thing. But what Saturn does, at least the energy of Saturn, Saturn does, if you just want to think of Saturn as an energy, Saturn is the ultimate manifester. It's the principle of cause and effect. So if you put the effort in, you get the result. And on this plane, that is true for certain things. You put the effort in, you get the result. People get confused about what they're putting in sometimes, and we're told to put certain types of things in to get certain types of results. But from a spiritual perspective, in my experience, if you put in the spiritual work on this plane, you will get the spiritual result. Period. Boom, boom.
Point made.
Because that's what this realm is about. And so, some people figure out how to use and misuse that energy in different ways, or you try to use it in different ways, really materialistic ways for a little while. I'm not interested in that, but I think that's why I came here, because I can say shit on this class. I could get shit done quick.
Definitely, Saturn is something else for sure. I know we're going through Mercury retrograde right now too. That's over the 14th. I just read.
Well, in Taurus. On top of it, it's like, so I haven't been having trouble with my devices. I've been having trouble with my stupid body. Like, my body keeps wanting to fling itself down the stairs. I'm like, what are you doing? Just stop.
I know that's what there's been the thing I just went through. I just went through months of a kidney stone thing. Don't want to get into it too much, but let's just say the last week or so, it's finally over. But there was a point where the stone was caught in that old man apparatus, and it was like a horror movie. It's over. And I thank Jesus Christ. It was I'm still like, I think I have PTSD from it, like, or something, like, psychologically.
Yeah, I've had to have them surgically removed before, and that's no fun either.
It's like being in a POW camp or something.
I am so grateful. This is one of these moments when when you were talking about your problems, Jeffrey, that was like, I realized that was one of those moments. I was so grateful that I don't have male plumbing. I mean, seriously, it's like, oh God,
it was bad. Basically, the rock would not come out, and it finally did. Thank you, God. And I was praying, and it was horrible.
Well, we were praying for you.
Man, still getting over it on a physical.
Are you feeling better though?
Yeah, but I've still, basically every time you urinated, it burned, and it was like, oh man, I'm just glad it's over. And I'm being more careful. I would drink a soda once a day. Now I don't. Now I treat it like ice cream. I'm trying not even to drink it at all, but I wouldn't like doing crazy stuff with it. But enough, apparently, when you do it long enough, a few a week is too much, I guess, at some point. But that's what I'm kind of blaming is sodas and stuff. So
That is correct.
water.
I drink a lot of water now. I've cut out tea, and I might have one soda maybe every 7 or 10 days.
What
That's
about
about
dairy
it.
products, milk and stuff, and creamer? Does that cause it?
That,
Do you know?
well, there's different types of stones. Um,
Yeah, this
mine
is
mine were
crazy.
oxalate, which comes from, I guess, certain like spinach or potatoes or things of that nature.
Well, I
So
got closer to God during it, that's for sure. So that was a positive. I was like, come on, God, please. I already had testicular cancer, man. I can't will rock, you know. But we got about 5 minutes. What your book is within grasp. Where do you have a website and
I
where's the
do.
best place to get it?
The website's the same. It's www.withingrasp.net, and there's links there if you want to buy the book. It's on Amazon. Both books are on Amazon. Uh, I publish these books myself, and uh, you can read about both books on that website as well.
Definitely, and it's been an amazing show, and we appreciate it so much. And definitely, like a down the earth God dude a preacher that went rogue.
Well,
It's
uh,
good though. That's a compliment.
well, I feel real comfortable where I'm at now because I have, like Wham said, I've done the homework. I've backed up and re-examined everything the best I can, and I'm fully comfortable and confident where I'm at now. And as I say, it's a whole new experience, and it's been freedom in spades. Uh, uh, know my place in the universe, and let's go from there. I'm not afraid to die.
What's the place that your book? If you 100% of the proceeds go to the Society of St. Andrews, what's that?
Well, that is a local place that works by gleaning fields. Yes, I do not make any money from within grasp. All the proceeds are a donation to them. They're actually headquartered here in this county, but they're nationwide. They basically go to fields and gather leftover fruits, vegetables, and whatnot that have either been left or considered not grade A, and distribute them to the needy and the
Can't
hungry.
beat that. Um who was I know we don't have that long, but Paul H. Smith, what was he known for? I know he's a major in the U.S. Army, retired, but what was some of what is he
Well,
known
he
for?
was a remote viewer and is a remote
Okay,
viewer,
okay,
and that he's in there because of what happened with Paul uh, in the Bible. Um,
Mm.
Paul had the Damascus Road experience, and people often think that he immediately became a disciple or an apostle. That was not the case. He went to Saudi Arabia for 3 years and had training. We don't know who gave him the training, but then he came back to be an apostle. And once he came back to be an apostle, he had powers he did not have before, being a tent maker. He actually looked at Elymas and was able to blind him, which makes me think of the powers of the brain, which is really why, in my world, Jesus came here to teach us to learn how to use our brains. And now we don't have the teachers. We're might get to a point like maybe me where you can maybe start to teach yourself, but we don't have the teachers for us to use our brains for the capacities that our brains are meant for. And as I say, in our future, for me, we're talking telepathy, telekinesis, all these things that are Star Trekian are in our future. And
yes,
we have powers locked up in here that we don't know how to use right now, and we have the ability, or some of the ability, but no one's teaching us.
I know there's one thing that popped in my mind from Neil Donald Walsh, and God says all my messengers have been defiled. And we have those teachers that come here, and then humanity, of course, does stupid to them on many different levels, unfortunately. Well, Wallace, it's been great. We appreciate it so much. We loved it, and I hope we'll have to get you to come back sometime. It's been really
Well,
good.
I
Thank you.
have loved it as well. I've enjoyed talking to both of you, so it's been great, and listening as well.
We appreciate it. Thanks so much, and we'll definitely have to get you back. Is there something you're working on in the future, or you haven't got that far yet,
Well,
book
I'm
wise?
I'm debating it in my mind. Uh,
Okay,
uh, there may be a third book. It would be the last one, but there may be. I'm still debating.
the trilogy.
The trilogy.
That's right. All right. Well, we appreciate it so much. That's Wallace Wagner Jr. Within Grasp. Check out the book. It's on Amazon. Thank you so much. It's been a great show. We appreciate it.
Peace and love to everybody.
Good
Thank you.
night, everybody. You're listening to United Public Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans. Everybody have a good weekend. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Take it easy.